Hello, it's Greg here. I just wanted to do a quick video because I've been I've read through Dante's Purgatorio and I'm slowly making my way through the commentaries on the book now, canto by canto. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in that book. I did a couple of songs based on it that have received some small amount of attention, which is nice. Any attention is good, so that's good. Um, but yeah, just how having read Inferno a couple of years ago and then having some breathing space from that book and then coming back into Purgatorio, it's quite a different journey to the journey through Inferno. Obviously, if you've read the book, Dante himself is a protagonist in the stories, in the poems, and he's being led through hell in Inferno by Virgil, who is also a poet that Dante looked up to and admired. But Dante himself is there actually physically in body, whereas everyone else there is there in spirit because they have to stay there, whereas he, at the end of it, knows he can go back to Earth, to his regular life. And he's just being led through it to teach him something that he can then bring back with the wisdom of having been to these other realms. So Inferno, there's a lot of sort of almost chastising the sinners for the various sins in the various circles of hell that he descends through, and seeing the way that they are individually punished for their sins. And he kind of takes pot shots at, say, figures at the time that he had a disagreement with for whatever reason, and they come up throughout the book. But I'm not going to focus so much on Inferno because it's been a little while since I've read it, but my most recent reading has obviously been on Purgatorio. And in Purgatorio, which is the second part of a three-part commedia, the Divine Comedy, it's split into three canticas, which have 30-odd cantos or chapters in them each, so it's like three books in one book. But so the second part after Inferno is Purgatorio. I've yet to read Paradiso, but that I may have a bit of breathing space in between this to digest it and then read that one. But Purgatorio is really different in feel to Inferno because he goes from constructing very sort of at times grotesque, almost horrific imagery in hell, as you'd expect in his journey throughout it, to really sort of hammer home the kind of level of how would I describe it? The level of punishment that the people there, that the spirits there are going through for their sins, because that's how seriously he takes it. He's based very much in Christian theology, particularly that of his time in the 13th century, living in Florence as he was, and he was exiled from Florence for some time as well, which comes more into play in Purgatorio, because obviously the penitents there, once he makes his way through Inferno and is led up by Virgil out of hell and into Purgatorio, or to the shores of Mount Purgatorio, where he'll have to climb and make his way to technically what is, for all intents and purposes, the Garden of Eden at the top of Purgatorio, where Beatrice, who he is trying to get to, resides. And yeah, so once he gets into Purgatorio, or the banks of Mount Purgatory, he starts to learn of the penitents there, who are at kind of a different level of sin, because the sinners who are in hell, I think the idea is that they never recanted their sin before they died, so they have to go and suffer and they're punished. Whereas the penitents, a lot of them are there because even though they were sinners, and again, it's different levels of sin, like sort of like pride, envy, things like that, compared to some of what he considers more serious sins like betrayal and lust and things down in hell. There's different things that the penitents are there for in Purgatorio. It's like they're still sins, but the difference is that they, even in their dying breath or something, they recanted or felt sorry, like tried to apologize for their sin to God or whoever. And for that, they're allowed to be spirits in Purgatory who are still penitents while they're there. They're still making amends at different spaces along the mountain on the way up, winding way up. And they'll be allowed into the top of Mount Purgatory, once they have properly what's the word? Well, gone through the penitent stage to get to the bit where they're um, allowed to be up there because they're sufficiently forgiven. But his whole journey through it is trying to see Beatrice, who basically rules in Purgatorio, as it were. She's like an angel there, but in his real life, it seems that Dante has taken Beatrice for granted and like sort of cast her aside, and that's why his soul, having been through hell and seen some of the darkest side, needs to be here with the penitents, even though for whatever reason, whether artistic license or whatever, he gets to be there in full body, so he's not actually, he knows he's not staying there. In some ways, he still has to go through a process of feeling his own penitence and regretting what he did and trying to make amends for it, with all the other penitents who have to stay there, so that he can get to the top eventually and be allowed to meet Beatrice. And when he comes in to the gates that open up to Mount Purgatory, he has 7 marks made on his brow that during his journey up the mountain, they'll gradually be wiped away one by one as he learns about how to be a penitent for each individual sin, like pride, envy, and so on. And so he gradually makes his way up the mountain to the point where eventually he's confronted by Beatrice, where he falls down on his knees and bears the full wrath of what she has to say to him. And it kind of, in that moment when she's saying what she has to say to him, his soul is kind of freed in a way, because he's able to let go of these things and sort of, while he may not sort of totally be forgiven in one sense, he's at least endured the penitence of being in Mount Purgatory and going through all of that. So in some way, though maybe, I don't know if it's the concept that the sins are completely forgiven, but at least he's gone through that penitence so that he can be allowed to move on to the next stage, which will be Paradiso, which I haven't read yet, so I can't comment on. But yeah, I just think it's, I mean, his writing's amazing anyway, and it inspired me to do a Purgatorio Part 1 and 2, which is also on this YouTube channel if you're interested. Just hip-hop songs that I did, just because his was prose verse and I wanted to modernize it, so I did that. But no, I mean, his writing's amazing, and obviously there's more things he's written than just the Divine Comedy, but I'm literally touching the surface at the minute with what I've read. I've literally read Inferno and now Purgatorio, and I'm working my way through the commentaries at the end, which kind of help you analyze and break down what he's saying in each canto a little bit more. But I just want to do a little video because I haven't done one in a bit, and I felt quite inspired by what I've been reading recently, so I just wanted to say a little bit about it. Yeah, that's about it really. I don't have much more to say on it at this time because I'm still working my way through the commentaries and kind of digesting afterwards what I've read. But really interesting books though, really deeply steeped in Christian theology and the idea of like heaven and hell and sins and recanting your sins and being a penitent and judgment and all kinds of really deep, heavy concepts, but that work really well in like a narrative story. So I'm interested to eventually read Paradiso and see how he leads it and ends the Divine Comedy, as we call it, or Commedia as he called it, and see how it all ends up. But yeah, very interesting stuff, and anyone who's been interested in this, I highly recommend checking out Dante's Divine Comedy. It is really deep, but it's quite a rewarding read. The Penguin Classic ones are the ones I've been reading, and they're really good because they have a kind of a long commentary intro explaining some stuff and background around them. Then you read the actual cantica itself and his actual poetry in verse, which they'll have the Italian on one side and the English translation on the other side. So you can kind of see how it looked originally and then how it's been translated. And then at the end, there's notes on which are sort of dotted all the way through to give little reference points to things that would be known about at the time. And at the very end, there's a bunch of commentaries on each individual canto to sort of break it down further. So it's a real deep read and there's a lot into it, but quite, as I say, quite rewarding. You end up with a lot more knowledge about Dante and his work at the end of it. So yeah, that's about all I have to say right now. But yeah, just something I was interested in and thought I would impart where I'm at with it. So thank you very much for watching. Cheers.